10 minutes to 9. Now, set your watch, your clock and your mobile phone. We'll come to more of our conversation about the coalition government. Lots of people emailing on this conversation about Vince Cable and what he said. I'm ready to go nuclear. Going to work is like going to war. And I specifically said the only way you'll get on the line is if you're prepared to say I'm a Lib Dem and I'm proud. And not one of you has. Lines are still open. I'll come to those emails in a second. Now, news you've already heard covered here on LBC 97.3 is that the July 7th inquest have been told how senior ambulance officers were depending on this radio station, on their vehicles' radios, to get updates of the unfolding terrorist attacks across London. It was the last day of the hearings before Christmas. The coroner heard this evidence, which is yesterday. Our reporter Declan Harvey has been covering events throughout the course of the inquest and give us a little bit more detail. This, I suppose, Declan, speaks to the problems regarding communication in that, great as we are, they were relying on LBC.
Yeah, I mean, what we've heard over the past 10 weeks at the inquest down at the Royal Courts of Justice is a litany of problems with communication, not just with the radio systems that they used at the time. This has been changed, but those radios wouldn't work underground, for example. So you had people in the tunnels helping the injured, trying to rescue them and get them out, but they had no communication with those who were up on ground level, nor did those people at ground level have any communication with their control centres, because the any channels that were working were so congested that they couldn't get through. Then they did get through, we've heard of sailings and messages were being misinterpreted or not passed on, and when they were reported, and of course we'll all remember the problems with mobile phones that day as well, and the whole network had been shut down by City of London police, and only certain people with special SIM cards were able to use their mobile phones that day, but that was people like then Mayor Ken Livingston and senior police officers. It wasn't the actual emergency workers. But we heard a statement read from Mr. Huggins, who's a senior officer at London Ambulance Service yesterday. He'd first been sent to the Aldgate site and then was on his way back to London Ambulance headquarters in Waterloo and had been caught up in traffic at around King's Cross. I remember the bombs went off at there just before 9 o'clock. And this was almost an hour later, and he pointed out that there was very poor radio communication, and during this time Mr. Huggins said that he was stuck in traffic listening to LBC and his official London Ambulance Service radio. And he said at no time had he heard on his official radio that a major incident had been declared. He said he learned that from a statement which was read out on LBC that morning.
Declan, thank you for that. You've been covering the inquest. Of course, you'll be back on that watch when it resumes in the new year. LBC's reporter Declan Harvey there. Well, we're coming towards the end of the year, as indeed the closure of that inquest for the Christmas break shows. And we've decided as we approach big event, Christmas, we should perhaps look back in the year and get messages from all sorts of different faiths. Today it's Rabbi Dr. Naftali Brewer. He's senior rabbi of the Bournemouth and Elstree Synagogue, and he's been looking back on the past 12 months.
Good morning. Every year, just around the end of December, although sometimes a little earlier, Jews read a passage in the Torah that describes the biblical patriarch Jacob's journey to Egypt, where he is reunited with his long-lost son, Joseph. The verse that opens this passage reads as follows. Jacob lived 17 years in the land of Egypt. The Hebrew word for lived is vayechi, which closely resembles the Hebrew word for he was, which is vayehi. The 18th century Hasidic master, Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Alter of Ger, points out that the Bible could have used either phrase to get across the same message. It could have said Jacob was in Egypt for 17 years without in any way altering the meaning of the text. Yet the Torah insists on stating that Jacob lived in Egypt. Rabbi Alter explains that this is because the Torah is trying to differentiate between two modes of existence, being and living. To be means simply to exist, which is passive. To live means to actively live a life of mindfulness, meaning, and purpose. For most of us living in a hyper-technology-driven globalized society, we rarely get the chance to actually live. We exist, but almost passively. We rush through the daily grind without ever getting the chance to stop for a moment to reflect on our life's purpose. Mondays bleed into Fridays, and weeks bleed into months. Before we know it, another year has come and gone, and yet we're no closer to discovering who we really are and what we are capable of achieving in any deep and meaningful way. Vayechi challenges us to pause, to reflect, to consider the fact that our lives could mean so much more. As another year draws to a close, let us resolve to make the coming year different, to make it a year of deep personal awareness and growth, a year in which we nourish our neglected selves and rediscover what it truly means to be alive.
Thought for the year there, Rabbi Dr. Naftali Breuer, Senior Rabbi of the Borehamwood and Elstree Synagogue. Tomorrow, a look back on the year from the views, the eyes of a Hindu priest. 5 minutes to 9 the time. Now, we've been keeping a wary eye, a watchful eye, on events at the railway station, of course, where people are trying to get on the Eurostar, and at London Heathrow Airport, which really now has become a symbol of the ineptitude that blights this country. Simon Calder, the LBC Travel Show presenter, is still at the airport. He joins me now from one of the terminals, and it's getting even uglier, I understand, Simon.
Yeah, it's deeply shameful. I've been talking to Franco Bianchetti and his family, set off from California, I think on Friday, aiming to get to Stockholm, which is not an unreasonable thing. They've enjoyed a couple of days in Scotland. They were then flown down last night to Heathrow, and they're currently waiting here. They may possibly get on a flight to Scandinavia on Thursday. But, I mean, they are the lucky ones. They've been at least fairly warm and dry. The scenes I've seen this morning outside Terminal 3 are frankly awful. I got there, and just outside the terminal, there's about 1,000 people queuing up. They're not being allowed into the terminals because they haven't got flights till later on in the day. And I was even there when two women pushing pushchairs with young children in were told, no, you can't come in here because, you'll love this, Nick, health and safety. There are a couple of good signs. Very, very good news. This is for Greenlee Hire Services. They, as you know, do marquees, party gear, hall decorations, waitering service and floral decoration. They can now add to the list on their white van airport terminals. They put up a couple of marquees, and bless them, the Salvation Army have turned up. They are dishing out free tea and coffee. The only Christmas cheer I can find here, Nick.
LBC Travel Show presenter Simon Calder there, thank you, talking about Britain's busiest airport, running courtesy of the Salvation Army. Emma in Uxbridge says, I'm Lib Dem and I'm proud. I can't ring in, but I think they're fighting tooth and nail against the fracturing of our society by the Tories. We'll do better at defending against media assassination given more time. No one said a coalition would be easy, but better to fight it out and get better decisions made than to have a cabinet full of Labour yes bots like last year. Sue in Gillingham says it just shows you what accomplished liars MPs are, depending on who they're talking to depicts what lie they tell. This is LBC.
My London Home. My London Home is a 2-bed apartment in Westminster, just a stone's throw away from Big Ben.